Right, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the option 2 of what's new in Fusion 360. This is for the March release. For those that are joining for the first time, we're going to do this every 10 weeks. And for the next hour or so, what we're going to do is run through all the latest and greatest functionality that's coming out in the March release. And we always like to kick it off with a few highlights from the release across the various different workspaces. And this time, what we'd like to call out as the 3 big hitters is firstly, design advice. So design advice is going to give you access to manufacturing insights right there in the design workspace. It's graduating from public preview to full release. It's going to be initially for plastic parts, so specifically plastic injected molded parts. And Kyle's going to take us through all the details there. When we move over into manufacturing, Dylan's going to run through all the latest and greatest. But the big call out here is that we're adding new functionality to both the nesting and machining extensions. We're also going to cover the machine extension repackaging, which I know is on top of mind for a lot of people. And then over in electronics, there's a whole host of new features and functionality coming this time. It's a bumper release. But the key and big call out is going to be component panel. There's going to be a much more comprehensive panel to allow you to insert your components with improved search capabilities. It's always going to be visible, which is going to make it a lot more accessible. A couple of dates. So we have something called the Insider Program, which runs for the first 3 weeks leading up to every single release. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail later on, but that started on the 9th of March. And the full release actually went live yesterday. So you should all be able to get your hands on what we're going to cover today. And that was the full release. Now, before we go into any content, just a little bit of impact focus, and that's only one slide, just covering the promotion that's running from March the 30th through April 20th. It's going to be 25% off Fusion 360. That's for the 1 and the 3-year subscriptions. And then on the extension side, it's going to be, again, 25% off, but this time for the 1-year subscriptions only. It's going to be available in all countries with localized communications and all channels. Now let's get started into some of the features and functionality. And if anybody has any questions or comments, please do let us know in the chat area, and one of the expert presenters will be more than happy to answer. So sometimes we release functionality that really is cross workspace. It's not specific to any one environment, and that's true for this particular release. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was improvements to users that are using a Mac operating system. This is specific for the trackpad. So in releases gone by, any users that bought Fusion and were using a Mac with a trackpad would typically buy a mouse. Our trackpad usability wasn't very good, and it was a cause of concern for a lot of users, especially those using the trackpad on Macs. So what we had going into the history here is we had an add-in. And it's really, really popular, and it allowed us to receive the gesture events from the trackpad. That add-in was going to be no longer maintained, and so the decision was made to natively support more of the gestures from the trackpad on the Mac. So the idea behind it is to make it a little bit more stable for those Mac users. And if we go into the details here, basically, we tried to receive the gesture events directly in Fusion and interpret them. Whereas now we're letting the Mac operating system interpret the events, and we just receive them from Mac. So Mac's doing all the work now, rather than us trying to do that work natively. So it's going to be a significantly improved experience. Now, one thing I would say is it's a preview right now. So users are going to have to go ahead and turn this on themselves. So if you're working with any customers, they're a little bit aggrieved by their experience, point them in this direction. I think it'll really, really help. Moving on to something called the service utility. Now, this is aimed to increase self-service support on product launch failures. So the details here is if Fusion fails to launch twice consecutively, the service utility menu will be automatically displayed. Now, it gives the users access to repair, reset, and uninstall from, oh, and that's a clean uninstall, by the way, from directly in this menu. Now, there's a couple of reasons why we did this. The first one is that the main reason why people uninstall our product is to reinstall it. And so we want to try and give those users the ability to repair and reset first before they have to go through that process of uninstalling. The other one is that one of the main reasons why people contact support is because product launch issues. And so we wanted to implement something that allowed is not only to repair, reset, and install, but also if none of those actually work, it allows them to gather that all-important system information and run the diagnostics check. So when they do contact support, which they can do from this dialog, they already have all that information that the support personnel would require anyway. So it's going to make it a lot more streamlined to be able to diagnose the root cause of the issue. Now, if anybody wants to draw this up manually, they can do so by holding either Control or Command and A, and depending on the operating system, during the first 3 seconds of launch in Fusion. For anybody interested in learning a little bit more about the technical details behind each and every one of these buttons, there will be a link within the slide deck, and we're going to share that slide deck out afterwards to find out a little bit more information about how the service utility menu works. Now, the last one from me before we dive into workspace specific content is the flex tokens. Now, this is a relatively big deal, so we're going to spend a few minutes on this. So what we had in the past was something called cloud credits. The cloud credits allowed users to access our cloud services. So things like extensions or cloud renderings or simulation studies, to give a few examples. Now, as of the 29th of March, 2022, which is, of course, today, cloud credits are no longer available for sale. Now, the first question that everybody always asks is, well, what happens to people's existing cloud credits? Well, there's two things to say there. The first thing is that we're not converting them to tokens. So anybody that's got cloud credits can continue to use them until they've used them all, but they won't be able to buy any more. That's the first point. The second point is they have exactly 1 year to use their existing credits. And on the 29th of March, 2023, all credits will disappear, whether they use them or whether they just expire. Cloud credits will no longer exist by that point. Now, the reason why we're moving to flex tokens is we're aligning with our named accounts business. We already use tokens, but we're also introducing access to the core product using these tokens. So cloud credits were great because it allowed users to access the services and the extensions, but it didn't allow users to access the core product. And that's where tokens differ. So users can access Fusion on a pay by day basis, and that's a 24-hour period. And for Fusion, that's going to be 2 tokens for a 24-hour period. We also have a situation now where users can effectively have 0 subscriptions to any Autodesk product, not a customer at all. And they can buy a pack of tokens and then access any of our Autodesk portfolio that is currently accepting flex tokens. That's not every product that Autodesk offers, by the way. And some of the links there at the bottom, which again, we'll share out with the deck. They're going to tell you a little bit more information about which products, but effectively 0 subscriptions, buy some tokens, use any product they want. And for Fusion, that's going to be 2 tokens per day or 24-hour period. This is pretty unique to Autodesk, and it's pretty unique to the industry too. So it should be a competitive differentiator for us. The other thing I just wanted to call out is in previous versions, when users subscribed, they would get 100 cloud credits with their subscription. Moving forward to tokens, that's no longer the case. So when users purchase a subscription, they will get 0 tokens. The reason why we did that is because over the past few releases, we've been making changes, and there's also some changes this release too, into how much things cost. So the most basic of simulation studies is now free. That changed a couple of releases ago. And the lower quality cloud renderings, they've reduced to a zero cost as well. And so it allows you to go ahead and try a few things for free. And if they want to make better quality cloud renderings, or they want to try a little more of an advanced simulation study, then they're going to need to use tokens or buy one of the extensions that gives them access. I mentioned before that there's lots of useful links there at the bottom. That's going to take you into a little bit more detail on the pack sizes that are available for purchase. It's going to tell you a little bit more information about which products are supported and the costs associated specifically for Fusion 360. Another thing I would say is a token is effectively 3 times as expensive as a cloud credit. So you can take the cloud credit price, let's say a simulation study costs 9 cloud credits. That's going to cost them in tokens 3 tokens. So effectively divide it by 3. Now, in some situations, it's not going to be that, right? So for example, the machine extension is going from 25 cloud credits to 11 tokens. And so the relative cost to the user in real money is going up. But the number that they see is less, right? So it's 11 tokens, which if you use that 3-to-1 ratio is 33 cloud credits, but the current price is 25 cloud credits. So you can see there's a little bit of a shift in some of the costing, but typically when you're speaking to customers, it's a 3-to-1 ratio in terms of real money conversions. Now, I said before, these links are available to you to find a little bit more information. That is absolutely the case. And the reason why we're not going to go into them on this call today is because it varies, and it varies by country, and it varies by the type of partner that everybody in this call is and associates with. And so we haven't gone into details, but these links will tell you a little bit more information about the situation specific to you and your business. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Kyle, who's going to take us through everything that's new in design and documentation.
Awesome. Thanks, Spence. So the first thing we're going to talk today about is the drawing environment. So if you've been on these calls in the past, you'll probably remember that the drawing environment has been kind of an area of focus for us this year. And again, the drawing team's just kind of hitting it out of the park, making sure that we are kind of bringing it up to the standards that were expected at Autodesk and that our customers are expecting as well. So the first thing that we have here is the introduction of whole tables. So this is something that's pretty standard in the CAD industry. So we wanted to make sure that not only do we have great CAD modeling, but we also have great CAD drawings. And that's one of the areas that we wanted to focus on. So here you can see that you have the ability to create a whole table. What's nice about this whole table too is it's one of the better ones in the CAD industry, according to our PM. He's been taking a look around and he says this implementation is really spot on. One, it follows your drawing standards. So ISO or ASME, you are going to now follow that. So if you've picked one or the other, the whole table will update. Next, it's going to also be able to be used with ordinate dimensions, right? So if you already have a whole table in here and you go ahead and create some ordinate dimensions off of that same view, that can use the same origin. So you're not having to place multiple origins, which is a really nice kind of usability update. And then lastly, kind of as you would expect, that the origin is updatable. So you move the origin, the whole table goes ahead and update. You don't have to place a new whole table after that. There's going to be some videos and blogs made by our PM for this, so be on the lookout for those coming out in the near future. And then the only known limitations that we have currently, is that this works for whole features only. So make sure that when you're modeling, you're creating those features with a whole feature instead of just an extruded circle. That is something that the team is looking into at maybe improving in the future. And then the last thing is that this description here on the right-hand side that you see, this like 17 inch diameter by 5U. A lot of times in some other whole tables that would actually roll up and merge those cells all together. The team is currently working on that and they want to implement that in the future. So be on the lookout for that. And next in the drawing area as well is this new revision table. So before, if you wanted to create like a revision table for your drawings and you're updating your drawings, you want to make sure you keep track, you would have to create a general table and kind of fill it in. So now we have the ability to create this revision table as its own table with its own dialog box that has some really nice features in it to help you kind of move through the revision process in a cleaner and kind of easier to use way. So the first thing that you can see here is you're able to select the columns. It automatically generates the table for you with the ability to have revs, descriptions, dates, and the approver. What's nice about this also is it's going to auto hide some of the revisions for you. So in that display and table that you see there under the revision history, you can actually set that to a number. And that makes it so that anything older, so if you set it to 3, anything older than the 3rd revision, if you're up at, HJK, anything older than that would actually be auto hidden. What's nice about that is it's not actually deleting that for you. So in older CAD systems, a lot of times what you have to do is to clean up your drawing, you'd have to delete some of those older revision tables or revision rows. And then you would lose that history. And so here, you're not actually deleting it, you're just hiding it. And so if you need that extra information, say if you're going back and trying to understand what has changed and when, you can actually unhide those to see all of that data again, and then rehide it to make sure the drawing's kind of cleaned up. Really nice implementation that the team's done here. In addition to the table, you also have the ability to now add revision tags, as you would kind of expect with the introduction of a revision table, and revision clouds. So revision clouds are going to highlight where you've changed anything in the drawing. Revision tag is going to tell you which revision has actually made that change. The revision tag is going to follow what's ever in the table. So if you have A, B, and C, you have the ability to place A, B, and C tag, though it will default to whatever's the latest. So C is the latest, it'll default to C, but you are able to place B and A as well. It won't show anything that's not actually shown in the revision table, which is a kind of, again, a nice usability feature that they've added here. Again, similarly, we're going to have videos and blogs coming out about this feature from our PM. And then a couple of things to note. This is not tied to a PDM. So this is not part of the manage extension. This is for any Fusion user that wants to use it. So it allows anyone with base Fusion to start controlling their drawings using revisions, which is a really nice kind of perk for anyone using it. And then the revision cloud, just because kind of as an FYI, is not actually tied to anything. So if you're putting it over a view and think that, okay, this is going to modify, this is going to move while the view moves, it's not actually going to work like that. It's just kind of a drawing in the background. So if you go ahead and put it over a drawing view and you go ahead and move the view, just make sure that you're also moving the revision cloud with that. And the last major feature I wanted to talk to you about today is this design advice. So this was released as a preview feature in the January release with a product design extension, and we are now releasing it as a full release. Now, for those of you who remember back in January, when we talk about product design extension, we're talking about the ability to help our users automate their design process by making the process manufacturing aware. So the first thing we did was we talked about setting up rules, much like sheet metal, for plastics. And one of the main workflows we have is this plastic injection molding design workflow, where you assign the material at the beginning, you create all these features that are automated for bosses and snap fits and all of those. And then at the end, we have this new design advice. And so design advice, really what it does is it allows you to check your part for design for manufacturability. And this helps a lot in trying to get that product to market that much faster. So you have less of that kind of iterative time between you and your supplier when you're trying to figure out, how do I make this in a way that can actually be manufactured with the injection molding process. So a couple of highlights here. One, it's going to highlight the areas based on the material selection. So you've selected a material that comes with a rule, right? And those rules kind of dictate what it's checking for. Here you can see that we're looking for thicknesses, we're looking for undercuts, we're looking for draft, and we're looking for knife edges. So those 4 things are things that it's checking for, and all of those are defined in the rule. And then what's really nice, and probably one of the more powerful things about this, is not only does it give you the areas that you need to check, but if you scroll down in this dialog box, you don't see it here, they give like a list of recommendations with links to articles that you can look at to tell you why it's a problem and what things you can do to fix it. So it's not always going to be that you need to go into your model and make modeling changes. It could be that you need to work with your manufacturing supplier and say, can I get away with this? Can we modify the tool in some way to allow this to happen? A good example I like to give is undercuts. So undercuts are something that you typically don't want to have in an injection molding design, except for when you do want to have them in a instance for features like snap fits. So snap fits are always going to have an undercut, but manufacturers have processes in place to create those type of features. So when you create those type of features, it's not to say that you can't have them. It's just indicating that you need to look at this and talk to your manufacturer before you go ahead and send them the part. What's nice about this too is if you have that kind of undercut and you went ahead and talked to your supplier and said, okay, we can use a slider to create this feature, you can actually go ahead and click on where that red exclamation point is, click on it and say ignore. And that allows you to kind of check through and see, okay, have I identified what I'm going to do about this? And you kind of gives you a way to walk through that with your suppliers. There's also going to be a blog and video around this, so be on the lookout for that as well. And then the only kind of known limitations are pretty small in this area, and that's that on larger parts, and we're talking like very, very large parts, there could be a little bit of a time performance hit in terms of it checking the part. So just know that could be a possibility. On most of the things I've worked on this size or smaller, it's not been a huge problem. And then there is a possibility for some of the areas to get misidentified during the analysis. And so if you see these little small slivers, it could be that the analysis is misidentifying that. Okay, so here we're going to go through the workflow just really quickly. So here you can see I have got a plastic part already. I'm going to go ahead and hide all of the additional parts in this design and click on the plastic part I'm looking at and then select analyze. And you can see it gives you an overview right off the bat after it's analyzed to see here are the different areas that I've checked and here are the different areas that you need to look at. One of the things that it's going to look through, is it paused right now? You want to see if you can play that again?
We had this issue on this morning's call.
Did we?
We might have to get somebody else to share the video.
No worries. We talked through most of it already, but it'll just show you how you can go through. It'll identify things in the it'll identify areas in the graphics window and then also in the dialog, and it cross highlights. And then also you can select through the other tabs, which are the different things that it's going to check. So thicknesses, obviously, but then undercuts, knife edges, all those things. I think that's all I wanted to share in that area. We can kind of move on.
If you keep stalling, I'll get it up in 1 second.
Okay. So you got it?
Yeah.
Awesome. So the next couple things are just items for you to know about. This is a behavior change we wanted to let people know about. We're going to be adding this to the documentation as well, so that most of the users will be able to see this, or all the users will be able to see this, but it comes with the performance improvements that we're working on in the import process. So when importing a Catia file, our performance team was looking at how do we improve this. And one way we could drastically improve the performance here is if we didn't import any of the invisible parts or bodies in a Catia file. So in order to create that performance improvement, we did have to make a behavior change, which is before, what would happen is all the parts would be imported and then we would just hide any of the things that were hidden in Catia. Now we're just not going to import the parts or geometry that is hidden in Catia. So just know that that is possible if you're looking for that. And then last, we always like to point out any of the notable enhancements that are coming. So first, I just wanted to say, again, drawings is a major focus. One thing that they did add as a behavior change is now drawing symbols. So that's like weldments, feature control frames, anything in that symbols area in your drawings are not going to remember the last used. So it's not always going to come in blank. It'll come in with whatever was last on that dialog box, either edited or forward create. So that's a nice little feature change that will, I think, improve kind of some of the usability there. Obviously, anytime bugs come in from customers, we take that very seriously, and the team's working very hard to fix all of those issues. And so we just like to point that out, give a couple here that they've been working on, and then just give you the overall. So then the design and documentation area specifically, this is not including all the other areas that everyone else will talk about, that they fixed 40 customer defects. So not just any defects, ones specifically coming in from customers, and they implemented 15 feature requests from customers. So huge shout out to any of you on the call that are submitting those tickets as well. So thank you for doing that. We really highly value that feedback, and it's something that we take seriously and want more of. So anytime you have any of these issues or improvements that you want to share with us, we look forward to it. With that, I will hand it over to Dylan.
Thanks, Kyle. So moving on to the next slide, the first and the most topical change within the manufacturing workspace is the repackaging of the machining extension. So the changes that have made, the changes that have been made are, firstly, advanced tool orientation has moved from the machining extension into the core offering of Fusion 360, and multi-axis contour, swarf, multi-axis flow, and the multi-axis bit within 3D contour has gone from the core offering into the machining extension. Now, the reason for doing this is twofold. The first reason, arguably the biggest reason, is clarity from a purchasing decision standpoint. Now, the technology in the machining extension before these changes was made was a little bit ambiguous. It wasn't crystal clear whether somebody needed to buy the extension or not, because there wasn't a specific set of criteria which a feature had to meet to make its way into the extension. So it was difficult for customers to figure out whether they needed it or not. And it was also difficult on the other side of the aisle from our standpoint to know if a customer needed it. The second reason is giving core Fusion 360 customers additional capabilities. Now, as I said earlier, the advanced tool orientation controls will go from the machining extension into the core offering. And our analytics tell us that the majority of people are doing 3+1 or 3+2 work, opposed to doing full 5-axis. So the majority of people will actually get a better deal than what they had before, which is really important. And it's really important to lean on that point as well. So there is a link to an AKN article which has an FAQ and important information which people would generally ask and people are interested in. And there's also a link to a fireside chat which is on demand with a couple of the directors from Autodesk who talk over the changes and go into a little bit more detail. And both of those links will be attached to the PowerPoint after this session. So moving into actual features and functionality that is coming into the Fusion in the March release. First one is trim to boundary and plane, which is a toolpath modification, and it's within the machining extension. Now, toolpath modifications are something which is done post toolpath calculation, and they always go into the machining extension. So what are the business benefits to customers to getting this functionality? First one is additional flexibility when using toolpath modifications. So we currently have trim via a polygon, and we also have delete segments as well, which are both really good features in their own rights, and they have their place when they are perfect. But there are certain situations where a different modification is needed, and this is where trim via boundary and plane comes in. So the way that they work is, first of all, trim via boundary, we simply make a a selection on a closed contour, very similar to making a boundary selection or a stock contour selection, and we can offset that positively or negatively. And trim via plane is simply selecting an axis or selecting a plane of face and dragging that plane and keeping what's on one side, the other side, or both. We can see in the visual, this is trim via plane. Whatever is on the left side of the plane is leaving because it's in red, and whatever's on the right side is staying. So they're really, really useful tools. Now, again, another really key point to lean on is the associativity piece. Now, because these modifications are referenced by geometry, it means they are associated to that geometry. So, for instance, if we made a toolpath modification by using trim to boundary, and we decided that we needed to make a design change, and that reference geometry changed, then that toolpath modification would update with that. Our other toolpath modifications, such as segment deletion and trim via polygon, are not associative because we aren't referencing geometry. So really, really big deal, both of them. We have a YouTube video which has been created. This is a really simple tool to use, but there's a YouTube video attached, and it shows you a little bit more in depth on how to use it and where it's relevant. Next, we have move entry positions. Again, a toolpath modification. So it's in the extension because it is done post toolpath calculation. We have a forum thread called tool starting position, which has been on the forum since around 2015, and it constantly has hundreds of visitors every week. People are always trying to move the start position of their toolpath. It's a very common request in the manufacturing space. And the reasons are, firstly, we want to avoid lead in and lead out marks on components. Now, we can get components where our surface finish is crucial to the function, such as mold tool. If we don't have a perfect surface finish, then the problem that we have is we have to do manual polishing once the component comes off the machine. And this means paying a skilled professional more money than we'd like to do that job for us, or hiring someone to do it for us. So again, it's not ideal. By being able to move our entry positions, we can simply move it from our mission critical face and move it to a face which is visually less important than the one it was originally on. Now, technically, the way this works, we simply draw one or more lines in space that intersect with closed sections of toolpath, and we immediately get some feedback from Fusion via the black dot, which is on the intersection line between the line drew and the toolpath. So that lets us know that it's closed and it's going to move to this position. A couple of things to be aware of is that modifications can't be made on roughing toolpaths, and this is the same for move entry positions, trim via polygon, trim via boundary and plane. They're all the same. We can't modify roughing toolpaths. And these modifications are stored in the timeline, meaning once we have executed that event, it isn't set in stone. We can go back, we can leave comments, we can delete it, we can replay it, we can do whatever we would like to do. Point being that once we've done it, it isn't stuck forever. Again, there's a YouTube video. This is super simple to use. Again, simply drawing lines in space that intersect with a toolpath. The YouTube video shows you how it works. And there's also a blog post comparing the current capabilities we had before today, and how we could do it in toolpaths like 2D contour. Now, advanced arrange, this is graduating from public preview going into full release into the nesting and fabrication extension. So the nesting and fab extension is getting stronger this release. Firstly, it builds upon a familiar UI, which is really important because people want to keep the learning curve as less as possible. If it builds up on the familiar UI, people aren't learning new things. They don't have to suffer as much as a severe learning curve. Now, some of the features which is good to be aware of, we have more advanced rotational controls than basic arrange, so giving us more granular options into rotating the pieces. We have multi-envelope capabilities, which pretty much describes what it does. We can select more than one envelope to arrange components within. We have partial arrangement, which means if we select 10 pieces to put within an envelope and only 8 fit, it's going to fit the 8 in and leave the 2. Whereas basic, that doesn't have partial arrange, will simply do nothing if they don't all fit in. And finally, grain control. traditionally, furniture manufacturers and people that work with wood generally like to align the grain aesthetically, and we can't do that in basic, but we can do with advanced. Now, known limitation is creating setups from arrangements that there isn't a defined workflow going from arrangements to setups. So this is actually something which is being worked on, but it's worth knowing that for the time being. A nice segue from advanced arrange into 3D arrange, which is a similar concept, slightly different. So this is in public preview, and this may seem like quite a strange concept, arranging things in 3D, but it does have its uses for SLS and MJF printers. So again, you probably figured it out, but what we're doing, we are arranging components in 3D space by manually defining the containment area. The use for this is, of course, making more efficient use of the envelope that we have within our machine. Not only that, people I have heard that are using this for packaging purposes. So if we have a box and we have some oddly shaped components which are going inside that box, then we can use 3D Arrange to figure out the best way they fit. Few technical details. This is in the design workspace. It has controls which allow us to space, or it allows us to have some control over the relationships between the components, such as setting distances between the components and setting distances with the components to the bounding walls. This also has partial arrangement. So again, partial arrangement is us selecting a series of components, and it's going to fit in whatever it can fit in. More additive news, and you have probably seen slides like this in the past. The additive workspace continues to build upon the portfolio of machines that they have in the library. And this is important because if we have additive customers who came to us 6 months ago and we didn't have the machine that they wanted, it may have been a deciding factor in the sale. And the fact that our library keeps growing, if we have their machines in our library now, it's going to make it easier for them to adopt Fusion and make them more inclined to adopt Fusion. So this library is worth keeping an eye on if you have customers interested in this kind of stuff. Excuse me. And then finally, from the additive team, better print settings and supports. So firstly, we have linked folders, which essentially allows us to link our 3D printer on our desktop. So we can set our printing, our printing specifications pretty much for the machine. 3D printers are slightly different to traditional subtractive machine tools. There's more settings that go along with it. Additive in general has more settings which are important to the overall result. So by people linking these locally or on the desktop away from the cloud-based machine library, they are preserving their settings. Next, we have multi-part prints with different strengths. So if we are printing 6 components at once on a 3D printer, which isn't uncommon because 3D printing takes a long time, so if we want to get as many on there as possible, then just let it run. If we're printing 6 components, the behavior before this release was we'd have to have the same density of infill in every component. So even if the components had different functions and required different properties, we'd have to print them at the same density. We can now make selections of each component on a multi-part print and apply a specific density and strength to that component, so they can all be individual. And this really promotes us to a more professional FFF solution opposed to being looked at as more of a hobbyist solution. And then finally, the more efficient support structures for FFF. Now, the picture on the right hand side of the screen is this change in action. You can see a beam-like support structure on the component, and this is traditionally how metal 3D printers work. FFF, the behavior before was to do a 100% solid infill support structure. The problem with that is it takes a lot of time to print the support structures, and it also wastes a lot of filament as well. So by having more dainty beam-like appropriate support structures, we save time because it takes less time to print, and we also save filament because we aren't wasting it by over-engineering the support structures. Not going to dwell here for too long, but we have small updates to the tool library. We've got some improvements in the sorting tab within cutting data. We have a nice little feature added to the search bar, and there's been a few bugs that have been addressed for overall reliability. Importantly, this is one of the areas of the product which most people engage with, so therefore it's one of the most criticized. And importantly, we have a backlog of tasks which we are looking to do within the tool library. So this is more just a statement that the team is back working on the tool library after a short time away, and you can expect to see more work on this ramp up pretty quickly. Coming towards the end now, I promise, we have the Sandvik Coromant add-in, and we traditionally do not promote third-party add-ins, but this is part of a partnership that we have with Sandvik. And the idea of this at core is a brilliant idea. So let me first describe the issue that most manufacturers have, and this is tooling selection and appropriate cutting parameter selection. Now, manufacturers send out tooling catalogs which have hundreds, maybe thousands of pages with tens of hundreds of tools on each page. And it's pretty cryptic. The language they use, the abbreviations they use, it can be really difficult to find the right tool for the job because there's so many variables included, because there's so many tools to choose from. It's a really painful experience, and most people would agree with me on that one. Now, Sandvik are aiming to solve this problem by creating a more streamlined tooling selection through this app, and it does this by taking really important parameters from the manufacturers, such as what machine are you using, what information do we have associated with that machine, such as maximum spindle speed, feed rate, horsepower, what material are we cutting, what type of geometry are we cutting. And it takes all of this information and it spits out a tool at the end. Not only does it spit out a tool, it gives us the appropriate feeds, speeds, step down, step over. And it also allows us to transfer that tool from the app into Fusion 360 as a tool within the tool library. So we go from putting this information into having a tool with the feed, speed, step over, step down associated with it. And it is a really, really good idea. And it genuinely will save a lot of people a lot of time. So would definitely encourage people to take a look at this. We have a comprehensive video series as well, where we go through the user cases and how best to use it and the results we can get, and a how-to tutorial on how to use it from start to finish. Now, getting there, post-processors. So every single release, we release new post-processors, we improve old ones, and we also add machine tools as well. Now, this is really important from a sales standpoint, because a post-processor or a machine tool in the library, again, could be make or break on a sale. If you speak to customers who are using HAS milling machines, then we definitely have that machine within our library because we've completed the HAS library. Likewise, for any other posts as well, if a customer came to you 6 months ago asking for a post-processor and we didn't have it, that may not be the case now. So definitely worth keeping an eye on the additive tools, the traditional subtractive tool library, and the post processors. Notable enhancements, we have had a few new default changes within the manufacturing workspace, making some less intelligent defaults a bit smarter. So keep an eye out for an article that's going to be coming out in the next few days to go through them even deeper. But apart from that, always good to get some of the more pressing issues sorted out in the form of notable enhancements. With that, I believe it is over to Spencer.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, so generative design, only one thing to talk about this particular release, and that's multi-export. So about a year ago, we changed our business model in generative so that it costs the user to perform the study, but to actually download and export the models, it's now free. Before it was free, we had a limitation of only exporting one at a time because obviously we charge the users to do that action. Now that it's free, it makes sense to be able to export more than one at once, and that's the change that's coming this time. So users can export up to 4 generative design outcomes at once, meaning effectively it makes it more efficient for users to take their generative design outcomes and start updating them, modifying them if needs be, and then performing more downstream operations on them. A couple of notable enhancements to talk about. Always looking to improve the tooltips, make it easier for users to work their way through the product, especially if they're using it for the first time. Incrementing study names, of course, has become more intelligent. And just wanted to call out Autodesk Flex and Flex tokens again, especially for generative design, going from 33 cloud credits to 11 tokens. With that, I'll pass over to Richard for electronics.
Okay, thank you, Spence. So this time I see I'm running out of time again, so I will keep it short. We have a lot of... Okay, now it works. No, that's one too much. Sorry. Okay, we have a lot of improvements. They're all customer driven, more or less. So for me, it's a customer delight release. So okay, we have the new placement the place component panel. So that's something, you know, the foundation of all electronics is library components. You have to place in the schematic and in the board. We have a lot of components there available. We have a lot of partners contributing, and now we have a new way of placing components. So we have the panel here on the right hand side. It's always visible. So you can put in, you can click onto an entry there and drag it into the drawing. So it's much easier and convenient. Okay, I see you. The sharing just stopped, but let me just go on. So we have the new component panel. So we have an easy way, an overview. We have filtering. You have search capabilities, much easier as it was before. We have some additional filters, so you can go into the library manager. That's the place where you navigate through the libraries we have. And if you go back one slide, maybe, please. Okay. Okay, now it's working. Here you see the you see the preview of the components. So if you click here, you see what are the different variants we have. So it's easy to understand what's going on. It's less guessing, it's more really seeing what's going on, and you can drag them out. So the panel remains visible. You can have some filtering options, as I said before. And if you go here, okay, let's do it. So I just search for something. It's just typing in a few letters, and then you will search for it. So it's much easier as it was before. And with that, you also have the option to directly edit a component from there, go into the libraries and check what are the components, where do they come from, that are already used in the design. So everything in one place, visible, easy to use, easy to navigate. And I just want to show you the whole video. It's just a further minute. If I go into the library manager, there you have filtering options on the left hand side. I can search for libraries that are in use or not in use. Where do they come from? I have a preview. That's all new. You haven't had this before, so it's much more comprehensive and much easier to work with. We have additional options to go directly into editing, and I can also import libraries from the local disk, from another team, whatever it is. That's the menu we see here. We have blogs and videos, and the next slide is about the library migration tool. So that's good news for Eagle users. It's easy to bring all your Eagle libraries into Fusion. If you start Fusion for the first time on your computer, it detects libraries from Eagle, if there are any, and then you will be asked, do you want to import them? And that's just a smooth transition. No worries, all the old libraries remain untouched. The old Eagle system isn't affected at all. You just copy it into your Fusion environment, and then you can go on working with them. There's one limitation. It's just for Windows users at the moment. Mac is not supported at the moment. We are working on this. And on the next slide, there's something about design blocks. That's also something on the way to Eagle parity. So we want to have all the functionality in Fusion that we have also in Eagle. And design blocks, it's something, imagine you have a schematic or a part of it and you would like to reuse it. That's possible in Eagle. It was not possible in Fusion now, but now we support it. In our phase 1 at the moment, you can consume design blocks coming from Eagle. You just insert them into your drawing. We have an additional option that's new. We could also import a full schematic or a full board. So that's the insert schematic or insert 2D PCB option. The limitations at the moment is there is no preview for the design blocks. You just can select them in your browser and add it. We will add this feature in phase 2, and yes, they're not editable yet, so we will come to a point, of course, where you have the design block there and you can edit it. This will be phase 2 later this year, I guess. Again, we have content, blogs, and videos. Okay, next slide. Thank you. We have an improvement in the push to 3D PCB dialog. So that's something maybe you remember in January we had introduced a new way of pushing from 2D to 3D. We improved the dialog. Now we see if 3D models are assigned to the components. So it's again something not guessing what I've done. I can see and verify, do I have all my components assigned with 3D models or not. So it's easier, of course, and they save a lot of time. By the way, saving time, the push from 2D to 3D is much quicker. It's notably quicker, let's put it this way. Actually, there was a report of somebody who had a board with a lot of drills, a lot of through holes, and this took forever to push it. And now that was the reason why we looked into this, and we found really an issue that helps us in improving time from 2D to 3D for all the boards. And on the next slide, that's something, I guess it is about the package generator. Yes, we have some new templates. I keep it short. We have new templates for DFN packages with rounded soldering areas, and last time we introduced dip sockets, and the dip sockets, they are with rounded pins, and there is a new variant of them, that's the so-called dual leaf dip socket, which would be a socket with rectangular pins. I just switch it here, and let's wait for the preview. Here it is, and then we have a new variant of sockets. It's just facilitating creation of electronics components, of course. And on the next slide, I have another thing that's really a really nice thing. It's not very new. We introduced this some time ago already, but nobody noticed. As you know, Tinkercad has an option where I can send my files to Fusion. I can create a schematic in Tinkercad. I can create a board on a breadboard, for example. So it's really easy entry in electronics design. And now you can just push it or send it to Fusion. And we decided to add a library with all the components you would find in Tinkercad. So you're familiar with the components, and we hope that we get people just going on working in Fusion because they like it, because they see the environment and they have all the capabilities, of course, they do not see in Tinkercad. But if you're a little bit into electronics, so it's easy to go on and transition to Fusion 360. Okay, and then I think I have the last slide about CAM export, right? It's the CAM processor is the place where we produce all the data for the board manufacturer, for the assembly service to put components on your board. And of course, you need some documentation. We had already the option to do some images as an output, but now we support PDF. So one place for all your data. It's very easy. It's literally one click process job and everything is done for you. So that's the way to produce manufacturing data. And that's basically what we have this time. It's a lot. If you want to know more, look into the blog that's available now. We will have some videos on the YouTube channel, of course, about all the new features we have. Okay, that's it. Now the last slide, notable enhancements. Everything I think is customer centric in this release now. We have 2 additional features I did not mention yet. It's the align command, which is exposed in the schematic. That's not new, it's just visible. Okay, if it's visible, then it's if you didn't know before, so now it's new for them. And we had a really quick bug fix in polygons. It was a critical bug we found, a customer found there, and we could fix it. That's really something. It was in the last second to have it fixed, but it was really I have to give kudos to the support team and to the dev team, because they really found it out. We dug into the problem and we could solve it, and that's really great to have. And that's everything for this time. And so back to Spencer and the Fusion 360 Insider program.
Thank you very much, Richard. Yeah, so we're coming to the end of the presentation now. I just wanted to call out the Insider program. So we mentioned it right at the start on the first slide. For those that don't know, the Insider program gives our customers and any of you that are interested in it access to each and every release up to 3 weeks in advance. Now, the benefit to Autodesk is that we get more verification of the new functionality and features that are going into the product, allow us to fix bugs earlier, and the overall aim of the Insider program is to increase the sentiment to each and every release of Fusion. We release every 10 weeks, and so it's really important that users feel confident and reassured that the updates aren't going to affect their processes. The benefit to the customers, of course, is that they get early access, but they also get access to some internal Autodesk folks, so they can ask and request for new functionality and features, and exclusive testing and exclusive access to the Insiders Lounge too. So we'll be disseminating this presentation afterwards. It contains a link to learn a little bit more on how to register. With that, just covering the key highlights. So we had design advice from Kyle. He showed us how you can get manufacturing insights right there in the design workspace for the new product design extension, specifically for plastic injected parts. Over in manufacturing, Dylan took us through the machine extension repackaging, which I know is top of mind, but also covering a couple of new features into the nesting and machining extensions. And then Richard took us through a lot of the goodies coming in electronics, but the big one, component panel, always visible, more comprehensive. And it's going to give a better look and feel to anybody using the electronics environment. The Insider program, which is what we just talked about, went live on the 9th of March, and the full release went live yesterday. So we'd love to hear what you think. Get out there, use the functionality, use the features, let us know what you think. And with that, I'd like to open up to any questions from anybody. We're at time, so if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of the presenters or Mickey, of course, on the call today too. I'd like to thank everybody, and on behalf of myself and all the presenters, thanks very much for attending, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.